Recording.
In this week's parsha, there are many difficult psukim. Difficult in terms of what the simple explanation of the pasuk is. One of the psukim that attracts great notice amongst all the Meforshim is the one that refers to the person who says, Ki yishrus libi elech. I will go according to the desires of my heart. Shrewdness really means according to the domination of my heart. I do what I want. Even though I'm part of the covenant, and even though technically I may be bound, but that's not my intention. I don't want to live by those rules. And then he says a strange phrase, Roman svos or Rava ezatzmeya. The simple meaning of the words is so that the one that is satiated.
No.
The one that is satiated will cover up for the one that is thirsty. The one that has had to drink will make up for the one that doesn't want to drink. That's thirsty. So there are many pshotim on this phrase. Rashi brings a very complicated, convoluted pshat. But there's a simple explanation that the Meforshim speak about that deals with human nature. And that is that people have a belief that surrogates can do mitzvahs for you. I don't have to do myself. So there's enough. You know, there's 36 righteous people in the generation. So the generation is guaranteed. So why do I have to do anything? Why am I bound to do anything? So that is the idea of Roman svos Rava ezatzmeya. The person says to himself, there are those who are so full of Torah, and there are those who are satiated with the waters of Torah. So it's enough that it covers over for me. I don't have those many wicked mitzvahs, but it's not necessary because of the fact that the Rava will cover for the tzmeya. Unless you think that this is a far-fetched idea. One of the fascinating things in Jewish history is the relationship of the Jewish world to the Christian world, especially to the Roman Catholic world. So there was a time, even when I was young, that, for instance, in order to become a priest, you have to study Hebrew. and all of the Catholic universities contain a marvelous library of sport. I remember when I visited my children in South Bend, in Indiana, so I would go to the library in Notre Dame. They had every sefer in the world. So they interpreted this idea of the Mantzvos or Ravot in a interesting and profitable manner. For centuries, one of the great incomes of the church, certainly in the Middle Ages, was the sale of indulgences. An indulgence was like a kapora. And in that world, 14th, 15th, 16th century Europe, heaven and hell were real places. And people wanted to guarantee that they would not have to go to hell. One of the ways that one could guarantee is by purchasing an indulgence from the church. It was like a Tav Yarok. If you showed it, so then the devil wouldn't take you in. And the question was, where did the church have assets to be able to sell? Because we're not talking about physical assets. We're talking about spiritual assets. So they said that the holy people of the church, the saints, everybody, they piled up so many good deeds. So they only needed, let's say, 10% for themselves. The other 90% went into the bank of the church. And then the church had the right to sell those to those who needed it. And they based it on the posuk Laman Svos or Avoas Atzmiyah. So that the surfeit, the surplus that exists is enough to cover the thirst of those who need it. But any such system, as you can well imagine, was subject to enormous corruption. And it was the basis for the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. Because the church was so corrupt that it could not represent anything holy. And therefore, this interpretation of Laman Svos or Avoas Atzmiyah, that somehow those who have can contribute to those who don't have, in spiritual terms, was rejected because of the fact that it led to this industry of selling indulgences, which only served everybody has their own ledger sheet. You cannot borrow one for another. And that therefore, the entire question of, for instance, let us say, Skut Avot, or the Skut of Tzadikim, what is that? How can they transfer anything to anybody else? And because of that, there are different, very, very different opinions and practices amongst the Jewish people regarding these ideas, whether or not anything can be transferred from the Rav to the Tzneya. From the Torah itself, if we take this pasuk and look at it in isolation, so we see that the pasuk refutes this idea. The sinner is the one who thinks that somehow we can make such a deal, but that in actuality cannot be made, and that therefore it doesn't apply. An interesting shita in the Mefarshim that there's a difference between the nation as a whole and individuals. So as regarding individuals, nothing is transferred. But regarding the judgment of the nation, so to speak, the savings of the righteous can be attributed to the people as a whole. And therefore, the nation as a whole could be judged favorably because of the actions of the righteous, even though there are many deeds of those who are not righteous that are also part of the behavior of the nation. So all of that is dependent on how we look at that question. How literally we take it, what the pasuk really comes to teach us in terms. So for instance, Yisachar's ruin.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big money maker. So I give you, let's say, $1,000, and you sit and learn Torah, and I have credit for it. Is there such a thing? So on a national basis, there could very well be, because on a national basis, the Jewish people need constantly the study of Torah to keep on going. But on a personal basis, the fact that you're studying Torah, I can't buy that. And therefore, it would have no validity. So this is discussed in the posting over all the generations. Today they have documents, but it's really questionable whether or not it has any effect, not only legally, but spiritually. I have the mitzvah of supporting the study of Torah, but I have no share in the Torah that is being studied itself. That's a different matter. We have, we see now, Mark told me that there's great demand for a lesson about Shemitah.
Mm-hmm.
The basic rule is eat meat and chicken. But aside from that, we're going to try and accommodate some understanding of the problem. That it really isn't that difficult. But there is, for instance, now I notice there's for sale.
Yeah.
You can buy $1 ounce. There it's up. And you buy it for a sheep a year. They only sell it for a year. And no work is done upon it. And you're Mekayim the mitzvah. Is there such a thing? And that's under discussion. But again, when all of these things become commercial enterprises, so then it casts it in a different color. And then it looks more or less like some sort of sham, convict. And all of this arises from how shall we look at this possible? And then it says, well, Hashem Slachol. The Hashem doesn't agree with that. He will not forgive it. And something is Bonai Ishahu. So Hashem, so to speak, takes even more notice of it, of the person that attempts that subterfuge. So in the covenant of Mitzvot are raised many issues, but they're all based again on this idea of whether or not, so to speak, spiritual assets can be marketed, can be assigned, can be given away, can help others. That is a matter that has very many different opinions over the ages. But in our time, it keeps on resurrecting itself in these forms, as I mentioned. Zatos is Israel. Lפיכך הרבו להם תורות מצוות שנאמר לנו חפץ למען צדקו יגדיל תורה ויאדיר.